Whatever is happening in the world right now, the war in Iran, the turmoil in Latin America and Cuba, if you follow the thread far enough, there's usually a connection to Beijing. How has China been exerting its influence in all of these spheres without being explicitly involved? Joining me to discuss, senior fellow at the Gatestone Institute and foreign policy expert Gordon Chang. Gordon, thanks for being here. You have called China, not Iran, an enemy combatant in the U.S.-Israeli-Iran conflict. Why?
China has been providing all-in support, everything other than combat troops. I mean, first of all, they elevated commodity purchases. Last year, China took 87.2% of Iran's exports of crude oil, according to one estimate. Year in, year out, it's about 90%. But there's diplomatic support, propaganda support, and weapons support. So, for instance, Iran and all three of its proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthi militia, they all have large quantities of Chinese weapons. You scrape open any sort of Iran weapon with a microchip, that microchip almost certainly came from China, or it was sourced for Iran through Chinese intermediaries. And Iran's nuclear weapons program, that was essentially transplanted from China. The list goes on and on. But you can see that Beijing has been supporting Iran, and Iran would not be able to have caused the disruptions in the world over the last 3 years were it not for Beijing.
You've written that Iran has essentially been doing China's foreign policy work for quite some time, with Beijing's Middle East strategy run through Tehran. Now that Iran has been significantly weakened, at least that's what we're hearing, what does China's strategic map look like in the region, and who fills the vacuum, Gordon?
China has essentially been forced out of the region, Raymond. If we go back a couple of years, China looked dominant. For instance, in March of 2023, it brokered the deal between Riyadh and Tehran, resuming diplomatic relations. July 2024, you had the Beijing declarations when the heads of 14 Palestinian factions went to the Chinese capital to sign that unity pact. But then President Trump came in. He had that triumphant tour through the Gulf in May of last year. And now with Iran being taken off the board, China really no longer has the inroads that it had in the region.
Gordon, if the United States and Israel prevail and there's some kind of new government in Tehran, does China move in to try to shape the post-World War order? Like financing the rebuild? And is the U.S. prepared to counter that?
China has always tried to make contacts with new governments, even after it's lost friendly ones. And yes, they will be there, but President Trump is probably going to block them because he understands what's at stake. So we're not going to make the same mistakes that we have made in other places by going to war and then allowing the Chinese to come in. We did that in Iraq, we did that in Afghanistan, and I'm sure we're not going to do it in Iran.
You've described and chronicled China's penetration of our own hemisphere as something close to an encirclement strategy. With Maduro now in a New York detention facility, how much has China's position in Venezuela been set back? I know they stockpiled a lot of oil earlier this year. The New York Times had a piece on this. But with Iran and Venezuela now off the scene, what's the impact for China?
Well, China is losing its proxies. And the bigger impact is that if you go back to last year and for about 5 years before that, Xi Jinping was peddling the narrative that the United States was in terminal decline and that China was going to run the world. Now that narrative is ludicrous. And even in Beijing, where Xi Jinping holds great sway, people are starting to question that. So the main point for Xi Jinping is that he has sort of lost the cue cards. That's important because China was intimidating a lot of countries into doing things because he was making that argument that they're going to have to deal with him. And matter of fact, even Trump was somewhat intimidated by Xi Jinping last year. I don't think Trump is intimidated by Xi this year at all.
What is China doing here in America that we're simply ignoring, Gordon? I mean, we hear a lot about the fentanyl debate, the cartels, the border, but you hear very little about who's actually running the supply chain at the top.
Well, China is infiltrated American society from the top to the bottom. But one thing that I focus on are their agents, their network of operatives and soldiers. On January 31, Las Vegas SWAT and federal agents descended on that home in Las Vegas, which was essentially a Chinese biological weapons storage facility. They found more than 1,000 vials of a reddish substance that was making people extremely ill. This came after December 2022, when authorities found a Chinese biological weapons facility in Reedley, California, that had at least 20 pathogens, many of them for deadly diseases, and almost 1,000 mice that have been genetically engineered to spread disease. So the Chinese are planning a mass casualty event from American soil to kill Americans. It's as simple as that, and we're not talking about it.
The Senate has been examining something that one witness, Gordon, described as an industrial model. Over 1,000 Chinese companies specifically set up to get children born on American soil, using our 14th Amendment to create so-called anchor babies. FBI agents raided an apartment in Arcadia, California, and they found 21 infants. Now, the U.S. Supreme Court's preparing to hear arguments on birthright citizenship. How serious a national security threat is this, and how long has it been going on in your estimation?
It's been going on for a long time. Now, a lot of Chinese people come to the United States because they want to live in a free society. And matter of fact, they are more loyal Americans than many native-born Americans. But the Communist Party has taken advantage of the 14th Amendment, and they've had this program for quite some time. We don't know the full numbers of it. Peter Schweitzer has written about this. This is really important because it shows one thing. Even if there are not that many anchor babies under this Communist Party program, the point is China uses every point of contact to take down our society. And we have got to eliminate those points of contact, because right now, Raymond, we're being overwhelmed. We don't understand what's going on. And until we do, and until we can wrap our hands around it, we need to eliminate these Communist Party contacts with us.
There's also the surrogacy angle. I mean, a Chinese national hires a surrogate, the baby's born here, and that child holds an American passport. Now, under Article 7 of China's national intelligence law, every Chinese citizen, including their children, is legally obligated to cooperate with Chinese intelligence. What are you hearing about the way that China has manufactured a class of compromised American citizens? And what do you say to people who say that's alarmist?
The facts are the facts, and Peter Schweitzer has put those out in public. And if they want to dispute that, that's fine. But it's clear what the Communist Party is doing with this surrogacy, because they're taking those babies, bringing them back to China, indoctrinating them, and then having them come back here, where, of course, they have the right to vote and they have citizenship, which really can't be taken away from them. So we know what they're doing. And if people want to dispute it, then they're going to have that conversation. But these are facts.
Gordon, does Xi Jinping look at the United States right now, stretched militarily, depleted of smart munitions, distracted by Iran? Do they see a window, the Chinese, for Taiwan? And what is China's combat readiness right now?
I think the Chinese would love to see that window, but they don't really have it. And they don't have it because the Chinese military is not prepared. Xi Jinping has engaged in more than a decade of purges of senior military officers. And that purge has actually intensified over the last 2.5 years, and especially over the last several months. So, for instance, at the top of the Chinese military, which is the Communist Party's Central Military Commission, normally has 7 members. Now it has only 2. It has Xi Jinping, and it has a political commissar. There are no operational officers on the Central Military Commission. So they can't launch an invasion of the main island of Taiwan because that's a combined air, land, sea operation. And it's exceedingly complex for any military, especially for China's military, which has never done it in its history. So right now, yeah, they see an opportunity, but they can't take advantage of it.
This week, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and the Chinese Vice Premier are meeting in Paris. This is the 6th round of trade negotiations, which is laying the groundwork for the Trump-Xi summit in Beijing at the end of the month. Now, Gordon, is genuine productive dialogue with the Chinese Communist Party actually possible? And what should be the non-negotiables on which the U.S. needs to insist?
The answer to your first question is no. It is not possible. Remember, this is a militant communist state that seeks the destruction of the United States, and which through fentanyl and COVID has killed more than 1 million Americans, probably about 2 million, a deliberate policy of mass murder. So how can we talk to these people? But if you want to say, well, we got to get along with them, we'll talk trade. Well, in January 2020, we had the phase 1 trade deal. China had some very clear commitments, easy to honor, and they didn't. So why are we talking to people, who have no intention of fulfilling their promises to us? We just need to impose costs. The Chinese are just delaying us. And, I don't blame them for taking advantage of us, because we are purposefully we're not understanding what's going on. And we have allowed them to take advantage of us. So of course they're doing that.
Yeah, they're playing along. They're kind of rope-a-doping the administration, which they've done administration after administration. Let's sit down, we'll have fanfare, we'll all dance and have, entertainment, and then nothing gets honored. They come up with these agreements that are like burned the minute they're signed. Before we run out of time, 78-year-old Catholic Hong Kong businessman, we've talked about him before, Gordon, and we've covered his case extensively on the world over. Jimmy Lai remains in prison after being sentenced to 20 years for basically the crime of journalism and free expression. His legal team has confirmed they will not appeal. The UK Foreign Secretary has called for his release on humanitarian grounds. You've followed this case closely. Does the decision not to appeal actually open a narrow door for Jimmy's release? I know there was some report that he was going to be released, but I'm not sure of whether that's verified or not. It looks fishy to me.
Yeah, regardless of what the British do, I think the Chinese will release Jimmy. And the reason is that he's already a martyr. They don't want to make him more of a martyr by having him die in prison. I don't know the origin of those reports, but I do believe that they are credible because it aligns with what I think the Chinese want to do. So I hope that President Trump exerts uses every element of power to free Jimmy, but I think it will happen, Raymond.
Really? Well, let's pray for that. That's fantastic. What is the strategy there then? What do you think the Chinese get out of it? Just they kind of get him off the scene and the world stops talking about him? Is that the strategy?
That's part of it. And the other part is that he doesn't become the martyr that he will become if he dies in prison. He's 78 years old. He is in very poor health. And they just don't want him to be they don't want him around. So, and also they will look great if they said, well, we're going to, on humanitarian grounds, release you, Jimmy. So Beijing thinks that it can get something from it. So whatever it is, we need to free Jimmy, and we need to send a message to the Chinese people by freeing Jimmy that we Americans support freedom in China.
Amen. Gordon Chang, as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for your analysis.
Thank you, Raymond, and God bless.